I never thought my life would change with a single knock on the door. It was late, the kind of night when you expect nothing more than silence and the hum of the refrigerator, maybe the distant bark of a dog down the street. I wasn't expecting anyone. Certainly not her. When I pulled the door open, I saw my neighbor, the widow, the one people whispered about but never really knew. Only she wasn't just a neighbor. She wasn't just a widow. She was alien. And that night, she carried a presence that pressed down on me like a storm. Life before that night was uneventful, painfully ordinary. I worked my hours, came home, cooked whatever I had, and went to bed with the television murmuring in the background. People knew me as the quiet guy who minded his own business. The woman next door, tall and strange, always shrouded in long dark clothes, never joined in community gatherings, never spoke much at all. Neighbors said she lost her husband overseas. No one guessed the truth. I hadn't either, until I looked into her eyes that night. Eyes too deep, too heavy with grief, too unearthly to belong to anyone from here. The knock had been firm, deliberate. When I opened the door, she stood there, framed by the glow of my porch light. Her skin shimmered faintly, like polished stone catching the moon. Her features were sharp yet hauntingly beautiful, but wrong in a way I couldn't name. Not grotesque, but different, unsettling in the kind of way that made you want to keep staring even as your instinct screamed at you to look away. Draped across her shoulders was a mourning cloak, though the fabric wasn't anything woven on earth. It looked alive, like a dark liquid shifting across her form. She didn't smile, didn't ask if she could come in. She simply said, "I need to speak with you. Now." My first thought was to shut the door, but something in her voice carried weight beyond words. I stepped aside, and she entered with a grace that seemed rehearsed by centuries. For a moment, I simply watched her, my mouth dry, my brain scrambling for explanations. That was when she told me. Her husband, she said, had been killed in the Great Galactic War. She didn't mean a metaphor. She meant a war across stars, one where her kind fought to keep dominion over countless worlds. And they lost. Not just the battle, not just her husband, but all their males. Every last one. Entire legacies collapsed in silence. What remained were widows, orphan children, and a dying species. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands trembled. She wasn't here for comfort. She wasn't here for sympathy. She was here because her survival depended on me. Her species, she explained, needed a bond, a lifelink with another race. Not just for her, but for the unborn child she carried. That bond could only be forged with someone who was alive, adaptable, and capable of sustaining the connection. She had searched, waited, measured. And it was me she had chosen. The words fell into me like stones into a still pond, rippling through everything I thought I knew about reality. A neighbor who wasn't human. A widow whose grief stretched across galaxies. An unborn heir tied to a legacy of war. And me, the ordinary man she believed could anchor it all. I laughed at first, a sharp, nervous bark that sounded too loud in the quiet of my living room. But she didn't laugh. Her eyes fixed on mine, unblinking, unwavering. "You don't understand what I offer," she said, her voice low, almost trembling. "Protection. Wealth beyond your imagining. Knowledge your species hasn't even begun to dream of. In return, you grant me the bond. You grant my child a chance to live. You grant my people one last thread of survival." It sounded insane, but something in her tone carried truth heavier than proof. My throat tightened as she leaned closer, and I caught the faint trace of something metallic in her breath, something that smelled like old storms. I wanted to say no. I wanted to run, slam the door, and bury my head under blankets until morning made it all disappear. But I couldn't. Not when I saw the flicker in her eyes, the weight of desperation, of pride cracked just enough to let raw need slip through. "You think I chose you at random?" she asked, almost angry at my hesitation.
No.
"I chose you because humans, you are unlike any species I have known. Your minds are unpredictable, your will unyielding. You survive where others break. That is why I am here." I should have told her she was wrong. That I wasn't unyielding or unpredictable or even remarkable. I was just a man who lived alone, who barely kept up with his bills, who never thought further than the next week. But the truth was, something in me stirred when she said it. A quiet, buried part that wanted to be more than invisible. Her final words cut through me like a blade. You're not just my last hope. You're humanity's first chance to matter among the stars. I stood there, caught between disbelief and a rising sense of inevitability. I didn't fully understand what she was offering, or what it would cost me. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I wasn't going to refuse. I agreed before I fully understood the weight of what I was agreeing to. She didn't waste time with ceremony or explanation. She told me to sit, to steady my breathing, to open my mind. I laughed nervously at the idea, but her expression made it clear this wasn't a request. When her hand touched mine, the air around us seemed to change, heavy and charged, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The bond wasn't physical, not in the way I expected. It was deeper, like being pulled underwater and learning to breathe in a place where lungs shouldn't work. Her memories poured into me. The sight of starships burning across the void, the final scream of a husband she couldn't save, the crushing silence when her people realized their entire future had been extinguished in a single campaign. I felt it all, raw and unbearable, yet she bore it without flinching. At the same time, she felt me, my doubts, my weariness, the hidden loneliness I never admitted even to myself. She recoiled for a moment, startled not by weakness, but by the chaos of a human mind. So much noise, she whispered, yet warmth. It was over in minutes, though it felt like hours. When she released me, my chest heaved like I had run miles. She was pale, trembling, yet somehow lighter, as if the bond had shifted some of her burden onto me. I wasn't sure whether to be grateful or terrified. She looked at me with a strange new weight in her gaze, not just as a neighbor or even a savior, but as something far more permanent. We weren't strangers anymore. We weren't even just allies. We were connected. The days that followed tested that connection in ways I couldn't have predicted. Living with her was like living with a mirror from another world. Every habit of mine seemed alien to her. She struggled with the simplest human routines, eating meals, resting at night, even the way we casually spoke to one another. She dissected humor like it was a puzzle, baffled by why I'd laugh at a joke that seemed meaningless to her. Yet when she finally laughed, it was awkward and short, but genuine, and I realized I was seeing cracks in the wall she had built around herself. She tried to impose her ways at first, teaching me rigid postures, meditation techniques, rituals her people swore by for centuries. But I wasn't built for that kind of order. I cooked us food from cans and boxes, told her stories from my childhood, played music that filled the silence she found so strange. At first she sat stiff, suspicious of my ways, but eventually I caught her humming along to a melody, her eyes closed, her breathing even. It struck me then that what her species had never understood wasn't technology or knowledge. It was the small, fragile joys that kept humans alive even in their weakest moments. The bond made it impossible to hide from her. She felt my doubts, my frustration, my self-deprecating humor, and sometimes it angered her. "You diminish yourself," she told me one night, her voice sharp. "You speak as though you are nothing, yet you faced me without running. You agreed when others would have fled. Do not pretend you are less than you are." Her conviction rattled me. I wasn't used to being seen that way, not even by myself. Still, she underestimated me often. During training sessions, when she tried to prepare me for threats I could barely imagine, she grew frustrated at my clumsiness. I wasn't strong like her, didn't have the reflexes honed by generations of warriors. One evening, after I stumbled for the third time, she snapped, "You will not survive if you cannot even hold your stance." The words stung, but I couldn't let them pass unchallenged. "We survive differently," I told her. "We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we don't quit. We adapt. We take what's broken and make it work anyway. That's what being human is." The silence stretched between us. For the first time, she lowered her eyes, as if conceding the truth. Her voice softened. Perhaps that is what we never understood. We fought for perfection. You fight to endure. Something shifted between us after that. She began to see me not as a fragile piece in her survival, but as someone who brought something her people lacked. She grew curious about humanity, asking questions about emotions, about why we cried at music, why we told stories that had no purpose but to comfort ourselves. I tried to explain, fumbling for words, realizing how hard it was to define what came naturally. But the more I shared, the more she listened, and the more I realized she wasn't just tolerating this bond. She was learning from it. At night, when the bond pulsed between us like a faint echo, I could feel her sorrow soften. It didn't vanish. Grief never does. But it was no longer crushing her. She began to dream, not the fractured, violent dreams of war, but dreams tinted with laughter, with simple moments. Sometimes I woke with the echo of her emotions bleeding into mine, and though it was disorienting, it wasn't unwelcome. One evening, she admitted what I had already begun to sense. We thought empathy was weakness. It was why we suppressed it, why we trained ourselves to bury emotion. But you're kind, you wield it like a weapon. You make it strength. Her eyes met mine, shimmering in the dim light, and I knew she meant it. That admission changed everything. The pact we had made was no longer just about survival. It was becoming something deeper, something both of us hadn't planned for. She had come to me out of desperation, but now she was beginning to see value beyond necessity. And as for me, I had stepped into this world unwillingly, but I was no longer the same man I had been before that knock on the door. What had begun as a reluctant agreement was turning into something else. Something that neither of us could define yet, but something we both felt growing, impossible to ignore. It was nearly midnight when the air changed. A low vibration trembled through the ground, rattling the glass on my shelves. At first I thought it was an earthquake, but the look on her face told me otherwise. She froze, her eyes narrowing, every muscle in her body taut with recognition. I didn't need her to explain, I already knew. Something had found us. The lights came next, faint streaks cutting through the sky, too controlled to be meteors. The bond between us pulsed, sharp and urgent, feeding me her fear. They were not her allies. They were hunters. She whispered a single word, the name of a species I couldn't pronounce, and the meaning pressed into my mind like a stone. Assassins. They had come to erase her, to make certain her unborn child never drew breath. My first instinct was panic. How could I fight against beings bred for war, armed with weapons I couldn't even comprehend? But panic wouldn't keep us alive. She turned to me, demanding I stay hidden while she fought, but her voice lacked the conviction it once carried. She was not the warrior she had been. Grief, pregnancy, and exile had stripped her strength. For the first time, she looked uncertain. I couldn't let her face them alone. I didn't have alien weapons, but I had my own tools. A hammer, nails, lengths of wire, and the stubborn ingenuity my species had always relied on. While she prepared with rituals and half-remembered tactics, I turned my house into a trap. Doors rigged to slam shut, windows lined with shards of glass, kitchen tools transformed into crude defenses. It was laughable compared to their technology, but it was all I had. The first intruder came through the back wall, phasing through solid matter like it was air. It looked nothing like her kind, sleek, insectal, with limbs too sharp to belong to anything natural. She lunged at it, her movements graceful but sluggish compared to what they must have once been. The creature nearly cut her down in seconds. My body moved before thought could catch up. I yanked a wire loose, dropping a shelf of heavy tools onto it. The impact stunned the thing just long enough for her to strike. Her blade cut true, but not clean. Blood that shimmered like oil sprayed across the floor, and the creature collapsed, twitching. She turned to me, eyes blazing, half in fury, half in shock. "You could have died," she hissed. I shrugged, breathless. We both could have. There was no time for argument. More were coming. I could hear the walls groaning as they breached, their strange weapons burning holes through wood and concrete like paper. She wanted me to fall back, but the bond betrayed my intent. She felt my refusal before I even spoke it. She knew I wouldn't leave her side. The next wave hit harder. Two of them slipped into the living room, moving faster than anything human. I stumbled, nearly crushed beneath a blow, but instinct saved me. I threw the contents of a toolbox into one's face, the spray of nails catching its eyes. While it recoiled, she struck, her blades slicing through its chest. The other lunged for her, but I hurled a fire extinguisher, the blunt impact breaking its rhythm just enough for her to finish it. I wasn't strong, I wasn't trained, but I was unpredictable. Every object in my house became a weapon: chairs, lamps, boiling water. Anything I could grab. They didn't know how to anticipate chaos. She realized it too. Between her precision and my improvisation, we began to carve out a rhythm, an unspoken language of survival. But the cost was mounting. My arm burned from a slash I barely avoided, blood soaking through my shirt. Her breathing grew ragged, each strike costing her more than it should. The unborn child weighed on her, slowing her body, draining her stamina. I could feel her desperation through the bond, raw and heavy. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a future that no longer seemed certain. The largest of them came last. Its armor gleamed, its weapons humming with energy I couldn't understand. She faltered when she saw it, the memory of her husband's death flashing through her mind and into mine. I saw what she saw. This same kind of warrior, cutting him down in fire and light. She froze. If I didn't act, she would die. I moved, reckless and unthinking, hurling myself at the creature with nothing but a length of pipe in my hands. It swatted me aside with ease, pain exploding through my ribs, but in that moment its focus shifted away from her. She surged forward, blade flashing. I didn't see the killing blow, only the aftermath, the alien dropping, its body sparking and twitching as it fell still. Silence followed, thick and unnatural. My chest ached with every breath, blood running down my side, but we were alive. She dropped to her knees beside me, her hands trembling as they pressed against my wound. For a moment I thought she might weep, but no tears came, only a shuddering breath that carried more emotion than words ever could. "You fought like one of us," she whispered. Then, after a pause, softer. "No, better. You fought like a human." The bond thrummed between us, carrying more than pain, more than fear. It carried something new, something that felt dangerously close to hope. For the first time since she had knocked on my door, I saw not just desperation in her eyes, but belief. We had survived the night. But survival was only the beginning. The night after the attack felt impossibly quiet, as though the world itself had stopped to catch its breath. My house was torn apart, walls split, furniture shattered, the air still carrying the metallic stench of alien blood, but we were alive. She sat near me, tending to my wounds with trembling hands that had once only known war. Her touch was clumsy, but careful, as if she had finally grasped the fragility of the life she had nearly lost. Every time I winced, she looked away, guilt flickering through her like a shadow. I felt it through the bond, the weight of what she thought she had done to me. But I wasn't angry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just drifting through life. The pain was real, the danger was real, and so was the choice I had made to stand with her. She spoke little that night, but when dawn came, her silence broke. "You should not have survived," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the wreckage of my living room. "Even our strongest warriors fell to them, yet you endured." I tried to laugh, though it hurt. That's what we do. We endure, even when we shouldn't. Her eyes softened. She admitted that her people had never understood resilience in the way humans lived it. They prized strength, control, victory, but when they lost those things, they broke. Humans were different. We took loss and kept moving, not because we were unbreakable, but because we accepted being broken and still chose to fight. That truth seemed to shake something in her. She confessed that when she first came to my door, she hadn't cared who I was. I was just a vessel, a chance at survival for her child. But the bond had changed more than she expected. She had felt my stubbornness, my compassion, the reckless courage that had nearly killed me but saved us both. And now, she said, she could no longer see me as replaceable. Her words struck deeper than any blade. I realized then that what had begun as necessity was becoming something more. Not love in the way stories describe it, not yet, but a connection that ran deeper than desire. It was trust, respect, and something that could grow into more if either of us let it. Later that day, when I could finally stand without collapsing, she gave me a choice. The bond, she explained, wasn't unbreakable. There were ways to sever it, ways to end the tie between us before it consumed my life entirely. If I walked away now, she promised, she would find another way to survive, though her voice betrayed the lie. She didn't want me to leave, but she would give me that freedom. I didn't need to think long. I told her no. I told her I wouldn't walk away, not because I was trapped, not because I pitied her, but because I finally had something worth fighting for. Something that mattered beyond myself. Her shoulders trembled, a silent reaction she couldn't hide, and though no tears fell, the bond carried the weight of her relief. That night, for the first time, she let me feel the faint pulse of the child within her. It wasn't words, not even images, just a spark of life, fragile but insistent. It hit me harder than I expected. This was what we had fought for. This was what the assassins had tried to erase. Not just survival of her species, but the creation of something new, something part alien, part human, something that could bridge two worlds. In the days that followed, we repaired what we could. The house still bore scars, but we were alive, and that was enough. She watched me as I worked, sometimes offering help, sometimes simply studying me as though trying to unravel the enigma of humanity. One evening, she admitted something that lingered with me. We fought wars across galaxies for dominance. Yet, what you have shown me is not dominance. It is persistence. Perhaps that is what makes your kind dangerous. Perhaps that is what makes you essential. Her words weren't praise. They were revelation. She no longer saw humanity as background noise in the cosmos, an insignificant race still crawling on its homeworld. She saw us as something more, unpredictable, flawed, but vital in a way her people had never been. The future stretched before us, uncertain and filled with threats. We both knew the assassins were only the beginning. More would come, and when they did, we would have to fight again. But neither of us faced that thought with despair anymore. She had her strength, I had my stubbornness, and together we had a bond neither of us had expected but both of us now believed in. One night, as we stood outside under the stars, she spoke softly. If my people survive, it will not be because of me. It will be because of you, because of what humanity brought into this bond. Her words carried a conviction that startled me, a declaration not just of gratitude, but of belief. I looked at her, at the faint glow of her eyes reflecting the night sky, and felt something stir that went beyond duty. Maybe you didn't come to me by chance, I said. Maybe you came because you needed more than survival. Maybe you needed what makes us human. She didn't answer, but the bond thrummed with quiet agreement. In that silence, we understood each other more clearly than words could allow. I thought back to the night she first knocked on my door, the night that felt like an intrusion into a life I had thought was safe, if meaningless. I hadn't realized then that I wasn't just saving a widow. I wasn't just protecting her child. In truth, she had given me something too, the chance to matter, the chance to be more than invisible, the chance to stand as proof that humanity had a place among the stars. As I looked into that endless sky, broken yet unafraid, I knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came next, we would face it together. And that would be enough.